Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Go to strengthguild.com, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to the Iron Radio collections, and we've got new shirts and new banners for you to support the show. Everything from just a regular banner, regular shirt, to ones with sayings on them, like Lonnie's Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree shirt. And some news for you, we're going to have some contests for people who own these shirts and things. So if you support the show, we'll let you more on that later. So if you get in on these early, you can be one of the first people to win some prizes. So thank you very much. Go check out the site, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to Iron Radio Collections and support the show.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiologist, I'm a nutritionist, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder. I'll get it together.
This is Phil Stevens. I'm a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete. I run Strength Guild, and we just had our White Elephant party last night. So I didn't drink too much because I got to squat heavy today. But
did you get a White Elephant?
I did. What did we get? We got throwing knives. It was badass. Yeah, we got throwing knives. Yeah. I was like, yes. Yeah. So, yeah.
Nice. It's Dr. Mike Nelson, creator of the Flex Diet Cert and the Physiologic Flexibility Cert, associate professor at the Kerrigan Institute.
And we have Heather MacDonald. Heather, say a few things about yourself.
Hey, I'm Heather. I'm a Highland Games athlete, a strong woman, and I train out of Unbroken Strength in Phoenix, Arizona.
Sweet.
I competed there several times when I lived there. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. My first 700-pound deadlift was in that gym, I think.
Oh, here. We're new, so you might be thinking
No, I'm thinking of where you used to train. Die Hard, yeah. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
I was there for a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
You got some news for us?
Yeah, I just have one piece of news. And anybody can chime in on this.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This might bore you youngins, but as I get older, I'm interested in this kind of stuff. It's about diet and aging, but it's a brand new paper here. Mediterranean diet and telomere length. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis. And we've been kind of rolling our eyes about this lately, but in 2020, very few new studies seem to be coming out, or at least fewer. And it's always like, let's do a review of what's already out there, right? Because how else do you publish anything in a year where you can't approach a research subject? But anyway, so this just starts off by saying, let me back up. This is Sylvia Canudis and a colleague, Advances in Nutrition. Anyway, accelerated telomere shortening has been associated with several age-related diseases and or decreased lifespan in humans. The Mediterranean diet is considered to be one of the most recognized diets for disease prevention and healthy aging because, of course, it's got all those anti-inflammatory and antioxidant kinds of phytonutrients, and it's rich in seafood and veg. And I mean, the Mediterranean diet, of course, listeners, if you're not familiar, their food guide has an entire food group that's just olive oil. There are so many good things about olive oil, I don't even want to go off on a tangent, but lots and lots of olive oil kind of thing. Anyway, two reviewers that worked independently, they screened a lot of titles, look at abstracts. They tried to include both cross-sectional and randomized clinical trials, but there weren't many RCTs as far as the Mediterranean diet and telomere length specifically. So listeners, if you're unfamiliar, so the whole idea of telomeres is just sort of, you could think like end caps on your DNA, and they shorten as you age. So things that will slow the shortening it's a nice marker of, biological aging. So they're looking whether or not the Mediterranean diet will slow this. Anyway, a total of 8 cross-sectional studies were included from 5 different countries. And I haven't dug real deep into this, so I don't know if this is the 5 countries are all Mediterranean. Is it Greece, Italy, Spain, etc.? or are these other countries that are just following, these diet principles? But in any case, they said only one prospective cohort study and one RCT were identified, so they couldn't do a meta-analysis of those. But at least as far as the observational studies, it says the present meta-analysis of cross-sectional studies demonstrates that the higher adherence to a Mediterranean diet is associated with longer telomeres. So interesting stuff. If you can just switch up the kind of fats in your diet, more fruits, vegetables, non-processed seafood, stuff like that, maybe you will, in fact, age more slowly. I know we've seen stuff with strength training and some of the biomarkers of aging, like muscle weakness, of course, slowed by a factor I've read of up to 4, just because you're training. You're not just letting age ravage you kind of thing. So I thought this was interesting. Maybe it's just a call to remember to, use olive oil, eat your fruits and vegetables, seafood, stuff like that. The things we kind of already know, but it's just interesting that they're directly linking it to this unique marker of aging. So
Very cool.
Just thought it was neat. That's pretty much all I've got.
Fun stuff. So we will get right in here with Heather. Heather, so kind of how we start this is go back to your roots. So what got you started in anything strength and training related?
Oh, wow. So I think like a lot of the, elite women in Highland Games, I started out as a track athlete. Mm-hmm. So I competed at Cal State Fullerton. I was a hammer thrower. I did all the throws, but I eventually ended up specializing in hammer throw. And I think it was 2006-ish. Yeah, 2006. A teammate of mine that had already, used up his eligibility started doing Highland Games. Because, for track athletes, specifically if you're a thrower, there's not really much of an outlet for you after college, unless you're, Olympic bound, which is, probably 1% of the population. So, if you're in another sport, you can kind of do adult leagues or, go off and do something else. But track athletes don't have a lot for them. So my friend started doing Highland Games, and he found this little tiny game. I think it was called the Black Sheep Open in Oxnard, California. So like a little tiny town. And he's like, I'm going to do this competition. I think you're going to really like it. And I did. I ended up going, and, like many Highland Games athletes, and I'm sure, Phil would agree, really what drew me was the camaraderie of the people there, because everyone was so welcoming and just, wanted to help you. Whereas I came from a track background where it was very kind of isolated, and you're, sort of encouraged to, don't talk to that big competitor, don't talk to your other competitor, which is lame, right? Because like, why would I not talk to the people I'm on the field with all day? Like, that's fucking dumb. So I didn't ask if I can use profanity. Is that okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Should have sort of done that, but I just wanted to make sure. So I went and did that little game, and I was just kind of hooked. And so I started training with that same teammate. And, it's funny because you hear, people talk about when you first kind of fall in love with something, you become sort of obsessed. And I think I was, because we would drive from, I would drive from Los Angeles County to San Diego County, but I would go to Orange County to pick up my friend. So if you're familiar with Southern California, that's quite a distance. Mm-hmm. So I would go down with him, and we would train in San Diego once a week, sometimes twice a week, and just train and just try to get in as many reps and as many throws as we could. Of course, we had a little bit of a athletic base, and we were still pretty young. So, it was successful for us, and we were lucky to kind of meet people and, start a practice group. And we had a practice group in Orange County, and then started doing more and more games, and it just kind of grew from there. And that was, like I said, 2006-07, and this year will be my 15th year, which kind of blows my mind. I don't know what happens all the time, but man, it's been such a cool experience. And I think it's really taught me a lot about people. It's taught me a lot about how to compete, how to be smart about competing, because I certainly did some dumb shit. And and also introducing me to strongman, which has been amazing as well. That's been only the last maybe 4 or 5 years. So I'm really thankful that I've gotten to have this experience, and I'm hoping I can keep doing it for as long as possible.
What led into the strongman thing? How'd that transition?
That was kind of organic, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of crossover, I feel like. And I'm sure you see this too in powerlifting. You probably see a lot of powerlifters that dabble in strongman and strongman that dabble in powerlifting. There's some similarities, obviously, with just base strength. But I had sort of seen other women, some of the other pro women who had done strongman competitions, and I waited a long time. I was kind of scared of it for a long time. I thought, I'm not strong enough to do that, which is crazy, right? Because we're throwing 95-pound cabers and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But I still was like, I don't know, I'm scared of that, which is kind of bonkers. But I started watching people like Christy Scott and Daniel Curry, and I thought, man, I want to try that. And I talked to some people about it, and what's funny is they said, it's strongman is really hard on your body, and boy, it is. Holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
And they were kind of warning me about the dangers of getting hurt, and I thought, what I better do. I think I started 4-ish years ago, so right up about 30 or 31, which is kind of late, I think, but I wasn't getting any younger, that's for sure. So I thought I might as well give it a shot and see what I can do. And it's been super, super fun. And honestly, I wouldn't be here at this gym with Unbroken and, with my friend Julia, champion masters competitor. I wouldn't be here with her if I hadn't started doing strongman. So, just like Highland Games, I got the opportunity to meet a ton of people and have a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise had if I hadn't have just jumped in and tried it.
Yeah. It's, both sports are crazy fun. I mean, I can tell you, like you talked about the Highland Games, I still see it above and beyond the rest of them as far as the camaraderie. And I don't know if part of that is like just from the beginning, like you're shagging weights for each other and stuff like that. So it's, but yeah, I mean, like you talked about, they just kind of feed into one another. So where have you gone then? I mean, the sport of Highland Games has changed drastically, especially as far as women go. But I mean, it's changed over the last 15 years. But from a women's perspective, how's it changed?
Yeah.
It's been 15 years.
It's been pretty crazy. I mean, if I think back to that very, very first games, and I'm sure a lot of women can say this, even women who are, older than me and who are, 60 and maybe they didn't start until later in life and they didn't have any competitors with them. And I definitely understand that. When I first started, I think I was the only woman competing that day in Oxnard. And now, holy shit, it's competitive. Like, Jesus. So we're getting people who are current Olympic athletes, who are, Olympic weightlifting champions and, track stars, and just a lot of dual athletes and people from other sports that are just strong as shit. And I'm like, oh, man. Like, but it's so cool to see, because that just means the caliber of athlete is getting better, and it's getting more competitive, and that means people are going to care about it more. People are going to really invest their time and energy, and those records are just going to keep going up and up, and that's what they're supposed to do, right? So it has changed a lot. I mean, there's definitely more opportunities for us now. I won't say that there's enough. There's always tons more opportunities for the male pros than there are the female pros, but I'm pretty thankful that I've been able to go, travel to different countries and, like I said, meet people.
Even the title of a female pro is fairly new, isn't it?
Yeah. It's so unfortunate because, COVID really kind of stunted that a little bit. I think the last 2 years, really, I would say, and I think my peers would agree, there's been a lot more, prior to COVID, of course, there's been a lot more opportunities. There's been a lot of athletic directors that have stepped up and said, hey, we're going to make the money that we give out equal for the men and the women, or we're going to have, a women's class that's going to hand out prizes, like, Phil, you yourself was what we're doing. So, we're pretty happy about that. Before, when I first started, of course, I wasn't a pro when I first started, because there wasn't really the distinction, right? And I still think it's not 100% the distinction, but man, we have so many more opportunities for, making the same kind of money that the men are making.
Yeah. And then you're seeing honestly, women in all strength sports has just exploded. I mean, in the powerlifting thing, we've talked about it numerous times. Like, let's say that meet I did where I deadlifted my first 700 pounds at Die Hard Gym. There was literally one woman.
Yeah.
In the whole meet, you know, and that was weird. And now you go to a meet and there'll be a day of females. Like, oh, this Saturday is women, you know, and there's 100 of them. So just that's amazing. And stuff like that. So basically, did you compete? How'd you make it to? Obviously, you competed and lifted, and you did something before college. What got you into that side of it?
Like the training. So the training part, you know, I threw, but as a track athlete in college, we didn't do a lot of heavy lifting because, you know, my coach's philosophy was we don't want you to get, you know, big and bulky and slow, right?
Wow.
And, you know, now of course I look at that term bulky in a much different way, but he had a very clear purpose, right? He didn't want us, he wanted us to be strong and explosive. He didn't want us to be powerlifters. He wanted us to be, you know, quick and dynamic, which makes perfect sense. So I definitely, you know, leaving college, I started training more and thought, okay, now I can really, you know, see what I can do as far as strength level. And of course, you know, that you have to strike a balance between still staying dynamic and then, you know, just being strong as shit. So that's definitely been you know, that's a constant struggle or a constant challenge to maintain that, you know, when you're trying to compete as a Highland Games athlete and you want to be quick and fast, but you want to also have static strength and pull a huge deadlift, that you know, sometimes those two don't go together. So you have to kind of find that line in between.
Well, and just the Highland Games itself, coming from track and field, I mean, it's basically track and field that's heavier. You know, you have to be stronger, especially you start getting into the heavy weights and things like that. So, but I think you were in that class, and that's what I like. When I started Highland Games, my first games was Phoenix, and you'd see one or two ex-track athletes, and they'd come out and just dominate. And now there's a lot of it. You know, you like you said, they found it as their outlet after college.
Yep.
And yeah, it's amazing to see all the people come up. I mean, I think the first women's, it was in Phoenix. It was in Adrienne Blewett was in her prime and crushing everybody. So I remember going that they threw in the rain, and everybody's like, "Oh, there's gonna be no world records today," and she broke like 5 world records in the rain.
That was
so.
That was one of my first world competitions, and I thought, like, oh man, this is how it's gonna be. Okay. Yeah. But of course, that's, you know, that's an anomaly, and man, I've had, you know, 1 year at the Arnold. I think it was the only year I went to the Arnold. Actually, was in the snow. It was the first year that they had the women at the Arnold. And I just thought, like, oh my gosh, I get to go to the Arnold. Like, I don't care if we throw naked, like, whatever, you know, I'll throw it on. And we threw outside. You know, the pro men were on Sunday, we were on Saturday, and they ended up, because of the weather, they ended up moving the whole men's pro class to Sunday, you know, when the better weather was, and then we were on Saturday, or maybe vice versa, it doesn't matter. But either way, we threw in the snow, and it was, you know, the caber it was impossible to use tacky, and, you know, it's less than 40 degrees out, and it's like physically snowing on us, like snow falling from the air. Trying to throw the caber, it was quite an experience, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
So balance now then between the sports. How do you strike a balance between the strongman and the Highland Games?
That's interesting, because I had to learn a very hard lesson, especially with like recent injuries in the last couple of years, that it is very difficult to do both. And I mean, certainly there's people who have done both and, you know, been successful at both. Kristen Rhodes is one example I can think of off the top of my head. You know, world's strongest woman multiple times, and just a out of control, amazing athlete. But it's tough, man, because like I said, beyond just trying to balance your body composition and trying to stay strong for one, and statically strong, and being dynamic and fast and be able and mobile. You know, I use the example of a lot of times I see strongmen come out for Highland Games their first time, and, you know, there's kind of the attitude of like, oh, I could do this because I'll be, you know, I'm strong, I can do it. And, you know, they do well at the weight for height, they do well at the caber, the braemar, which is a little more static, but then we get to the hammer, or we get to the weight for distance, and they get humbled, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess it's just about trying to take care of your body. I mean, it's just like any other, you know, if you're, you know, trying to do 2 sports at once, you have to think about like what your purposes are for each sport. You know, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to go out there and win. Well, what do you have to do to prepare to do that, right?
Yeah.
I definitely have had to, again, this is all outside of COVID circumstances, but I've definitely had to reduce the number of games that I went to if I wanted to also compete in strongman. And I remember having a conversation with my coach about, I was doing both, and I was so pumped to just be learning something new that I told my coach, and my coach is James Bullock out of Joplin, Missouri, actually. Okay. And I told him, maybe I'll do a powerlifting meet, maybe like a push-pull or something. You cannot do all the things. Pick two, you can't do all three. I'm like, all right, fine.
Is there one, like, a conversation I had years ago? Oh God, it's probably been 10 years ago now. So I was doing what you're talking about. Basically, I had started Highland Games. I made it. They forced me to start in B class, and 2 games later, they forced me to A class. So it's like, hey man, I'm gonna go pro. So I'm trying to go pro, and I'm trying to deadlift 800 pounds raw beltless. And Dan John calls me, and basically he said, Phil, there's lots of people that are really bad pros, subpar pros, but there aren't many people that have ever deadlifted 800 raw. He said, you need to concentrate on one.
Yeah.
So basically it was that point. Like, it's not that I don't do Highland Games, but it's my fun sport. Do you have one, like, it's one more serious to you?
Right. Yeah. And that's hard. That's a hard thing to
I know. Yeah, it is.
It's so hard. And like I said, COVID has kind of, forced me and certainly a lot of us to kind of take a step back and reassess that. And what's interesting with that is, I didn't intend to talk about COVID, but really it's kind of a theme. But what it's made me also think about is for Highland Games and the future of Highland Games, because a lot of those games are associated with festivals. Right now, like this last year, yours included, your competition included, I had 10 competitions canceled. Yeah. So that's the whole year,
Yep.
So, it was sort of a bittersweet because the silver lining of it was that I had to have knee surgery anyway. So I thought, well, shit, I might as well take this time to heal up. But at the same time, I did notice that the kind of cool thing right now about strongman competitions is that because they're not attached to festivals with thousands of people in attendance, it's a little bit easier to still maintain some level of competition. I mean, certainly you can't do your nationals or your original strongman games or the Arnold, obviously, but it's still, people are having an easier time, I think, in the strongman community continuing training and maintaining a base level of training than for the games where, you can go out and throw on your own. Like, I'm supposed to go later on today, help a guy with a sheath, but beyond that, there's not really much we can do right now.
Yeah, that's tough because, a lot of the games, unlike you said, strongman competitions, like even powerlifting competitions, like you can throw one. Most of them are at a local gym. And if there's no crowd, whatever, because it's usually just like family and friends anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But those games, like, I don't know, the big ones, Pleasanton and things like that, like they literally can't run. They require 40,000 people to show up to pay for it. So, yeah, that makes that tough. Yeah, I think we can, you want to go to commercial break and then we'll get into the topic?
If I can ask, Heather, I just have one question for you guys. And I'm sure we've talked about this ages in the past, but can you compare turning pro in your two main sports? Like, if somebody, I love the theme about actually staying intensely serious with your sport after college, right? Like as a grown-up. But turning pro, you guys are talking about that quite a bit. Is there a big difference? Like, how do you turn pro in one versus the other if, people are sort of in your state maybe 5 or 10 years ago, Heather, right? They're getting into this, and can I be a pro? How does that whole thing work?
Yeah, so that's such a good question. And I would say for Highland Games, it's a little more nebulous than for strongman. Strongman, there's a little more clear cut. I will say I am not a pro in strongman in any way, shape, or form. So I'll start with strongman since it's easier. Strongman, you can go to specific shows that you can qualify for the Arnold. At the Arnold, you get your pro card. And that, that changes. There's some variables with that depending on the federation that you compete in. You have essentially 2 main federations for Strongman Corporation, and USF, United States Strongman. So it's a little more clear cut with that. You go to a show knowing, okay, if I win or if I podium, then I get my pro card, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. For Highland Games, we do not have that. It is it's pretty nebulous. So, for the men, I would say for the men, because there's an established kind of etiquette or kind of path for the dudes, you, like Phil said, you start out in maybe the C's or the B's, and then you move up to an A, you train a while as an A, and if you, continue training and you're good enough, you can declare yourself pro. But that also requires a little bit of legwork on your part. And I think that's what makes our sport kind of unique, in that you have to really prove yourself. So you're almost like pledging to be a pro. So you go to certain games, with the intent of talking to ADs, making yourself known, getting your face out there. And I realize I'm just kind of speaking for the dudes that have done this, but I've seen it. You go to different ADs and you try to get invites, really, essentially, and eventually, and if your marks are good enough, right? If your marks are good enough and you're a world-class athlete, but you're a total dick, you're not going to get invitations.
Yep.
Right? So, and that's kind of also very unique to Highland Games, I think.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, that's part of that is, again, back to the festival atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like, there are people that aren't the best pros. Like, they're lower tier pros, but they'll get invited because they are a great showman and sportsman.
Yeah.
So people love to watch them. Like Chad Akes. He frickin' screams and yells, and people love watching a big bearded dude run around and do things when he did it. I think he's retired now. But
yeah, I haven't seen him compete in a while.
Yeah, but I mean, he would get invites for that. He didn't win, but people loved watching that. But
yeah, and that's important, because ultimately, we're a sport, but we're also putting on a show for the crowd. So,
yes.
The athletic directors, they want people that are going to represent the sport well, represent the festival well, and and just be a good competitor. And part of being a good competitor is, being nice. Don't be an asshole. You can do that when you step off the field, right at the bar later. But yeah, as far as the pro distinction, it's a lot of work that the guys have to. I respect a lot of people that really take the time and put the energy into trying to get invites, because I feel like it is a lot of work. And for the women, obviously it's different. For us, I feel like obviously there is the camaraderie part of it, and you still don't want to be a dick even as a woman, but at the same time, there's just so much fewer of us that really for us it's more about numbers. So I think I would say for most of the women's pro, or sometimes they're called women's elite competitions, it is invitation based, or it is based on the individual athletic director, or it's based on rankings. So we have a ranking system, and for women's worlds, for instance, it's just based on straight rankings. So it's pretty clear. Top 10. If someone can't go, then they go down the list until they fill all the spots. So I think I like that way personally. I think that's pretty clear cut. Either you do it or you don't. And if I don't go, I don't go. That's fine. Because worlds should be the best in the world. So
yeah.
Got it.
All right, we will do a short commercial break, and then we're going to come back.
Sweet.
Cool.
I can't stop feeling. Some of us don't understand how lucky we are to be living in this.
Hi, listeners. This is Rob from Fortress Fortney. I'm here to remind you that as the holiday season approaches and your thoughts turn to giving, we like you to keep Iron Radio in your thoughts.
Over the past several years, there have been hundreds of listener comments hoping that Iron Radio stays on the air for years to come. Iron Radio is here for you. But as with any public radio type format, the show is listener supported. That's where you come in. For just $4 a month, you become a supporting member, keeping your weekly dose of education, experts, and gym talk flowing. Just go to www.ironradio.org and click on the $4 monthly subscribe button near the bottom of the page.
Or click the donate button at the right of the page for a one-time donation. You are the Iron Brotherhood and Sisterhood.
Of course, not everyone can afford to be a supporting member or a significant one-time donor. But for those of you willing to pitch in, $4 per month or $50 just once, we're about to sweeten the deal. Become a supporting member or major donor between now and January, and a limited number of you will receive a gift worth over $20. And we will never forget our existing supporters. Simply email me via ironradio.org, and I'll send you a free seminar from Dr. Lowry on how to significantly and realistically boost your testosterone levels. Help your Iron brothers and sisters who cannot pitch in but deserve better internet programming in our sports. And happy holidays.
Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go. Okay, listeners, after more than a decade of joining us on the podcast airwaves, you can now also become viewers on YouTube. This is not our usual simple backup of the audio show, but rather a growing body of video taste tests covering various foods of interest to nutrition enthusiasts, bodybuilders, and powerlifters. From within YouTube, simply search for Iron Radio Taste Test or Nutrition Radio Taste Test. In about 15 minutes, we cover taste and texture similar to other products, usefulness to the co-hosts, and whether we would recommend the product to certain clients. You may even want to watch our podcast feed or Facebook group for which products are coming down the pike so you can taste test them with us. Join us for this new monthly project.
Weekly fix of Iron Radio. In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more, that's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
Okay, we are back, Iron Radio listeners. Again, we have Heather MacDonald on, and for the topic of the day, one of the resounding themes of our show has been kind of a mix between Egghead and Meathead, and so Heather's kind of a good fit. Yeah. So we're going to talk about, basically you've already talked about your athletic background. You went to college while doing track and field, and then doing Highland Games after, and this and that. So, but you went to college and became a professor, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So, that's what we're going to talk about, is finding that balance between Egghead and Meathead now, during coming up in college, and like how you balance it now. I mean, you got to, essentially you need to train, but you also need to do your job. So,
yeah.
Let's start off in college. So, I mean, it's fairly evident you had to, actually, you weren't just you're one of those athletes that came out with a degree. So you weren't there just for college. So let's talk about, how'd you balance actually doing well in school with also doing track and field?
It's funny because looking back, I was always envious of the people that were, fully scholarshiped, and because I certainly was not. I was a walk-on, so I didn't get shit, which is fine. Yeah. I wasn't a, All-American or anything like that. I did what I came there to do, and I was super thankful for the experience. But I always liked school. I felt like school was kind of an escape from home life, and I didn't have to be at home, so I could be out all day. I was like, this is pretty rad. So, I felt like I had to do well, and I had to maintain a certain grade average to be on the team. So it seemed like kind of a no-brainer to me. If you want to keep competing and doing this really rad, fun sport, then, get good grades, but looking back, that was really tough, working, 40 hours a week, and then, in the mornings, and then going to practice, and then having classes at night. So, working from 5 a.m. till 10 p.m., you're doing some kind of work, whether it's mental or physical work. And, looking back now I'm like, okay, I worked for 4 hours in the morning, and I think I'm done, like 32. I was like, yeah, let's do all the things. I certainly don't have the energy for that anymore. But yeah, it's definitely a balance. But I think that, you know, having both of those, and I'm so glad you framed it that way, of the, you know, the egghead and the meathead, because I found that for instance, I was an English major. I was the only English major out of all of maybe we had, I don't know, 350, between 350 and 500 maybe, roughly, athletes at Cal State Fullerton. And I think I was the only English major, so I definitely felt a little weird. Because, you know, most of my peers were either kinesiology majors or, you know, sports psych or something that also related to athletics. And, you know, I would finish practice and I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to go learn about poetry. Like, see you later. So, you know, it's kind of weird because I'm on that, you know, different side of the brain, I guess. But it is definitely a balance. Like, now I think about it more in terms of the body, in the sense of, you know, sometimes I'll sit for 6 hours, which I know is terrible for you, but I'll sit for 6 hours and grade papers. And then, you know, I'll try and go train and my body's like, bitch, what are you doing? You can't just go from like sitting, you know, in this awful, horrible, like I'm sitting now, in this like slouched position, and then go try to, you know, deadlift or go try to press an axle. You know, you have to transition from that. So that's kind of what I've learned getting as a quote unquote aging athlete, I guess, is, you know, that balance is going to just require more attention. You know, you can't just switch off and, you know, get into training mode. And, you know, here at this gym, we try to tell our members that same thing. Like, when you come into the gym, whatever you were doing before, which is probably the 100% opposite of what you're doing now, you have to mentally switch into a different mode. You know, don't come in here thinking about your work problems or carrying your work problems, you know, literally or metaphorically. You have to switch it off, you know, and get into training mode. And that's difficult. Sometimes it's really hard to do.
Well, and I think Lonnie and Mike can probably talk on this better, but I think we're seeing more and more studies and things done on the connections of the two. The physical body and training it, and mental health, and especially now with a lack of physical education coming in, like primary school, K through 12, where they've done away with a lot of that. And then, but if you look at some of the old stuff, I mean, go back in Greek and Roman, and it was all about both. And even recess time for kids. I mean, there's that time it's needed. They need that physical outlet to even help their brain learn. You guys have anything on that, Lonnie?
No, I agree.
I know I'm putting you on the spot. I mean,
oh yeah, but I'm sure we've all
just tout a study,
right? I'm sure we've all seen some things in the past about, when you rob that, obviously there's changes to blood flow and your metabolism, what's happening in your brain and your body and stuff, and there's no doubt that physical types of things in school with budget cuts and everything else are under attack. I mean, think about the whole COVID environment where kids are sitting at home. And, you know, I hear a lot of stuff about, they're going to be set back, you know, half a year if they're doing online learning and, you know, mentally. But I also think about physically. You know, there are certain maturational windows, especially for young kids, like you're saying, like K through 12 types, that I don't know, can you even really reclaim that? You know, I think about J.L. Holdsworth talks about some of that, like almost like a food guide pyramid, you know, like you teach basic agility and strength and movement type things, you know, like moving laterally on all fours, you know, stuff like that, just basic stuff before you can jump into hyper specific stuff, like spend all day, you know, shooting 3-pointers or something like that. And I think, you know, kids miss that kind of stuff. When they don't get some of those basic things, they're not just physically dysfunctional, I mean, maturational windows, but even to Heather's point, as an aging lifter, you know, like where would you be without that? I mean, Heather, imagine where would you be if there wasn't a constant resistance training portion of your adult life? Because being a professor will turn you into a beanbag chair if you're not careful.
Absolutely. And I hate to compare myself to my colleagues, but I do see that, you know, it's not common, right? It's not common to find someone that's a strength athlete. It's a niche sport. So, you know, I go to faculty meetings. I mean, I guess not really lately, but in the past I've gone to faculty meetings and I'm like, okay, you know, I don't really find very many other academics who train in this sense, and, I kind of listen to people talk about, I have trouble getting up the stairs. I have trouble doing this. I have trouble doing this. And I'm like, oh man, like, just a little bit of movement will counteract that. Right. And you guys know much more about that than I do, obviously. But even like, I've had people tell me, oh, that stuff that you do is so far beyond what I can do. But really it's not, there's just, like you said, little things that you can do to make, improve your mental capacity by improving your body. And, that's something actually for Girl, which is a, company I'm a representative of, coming up. I'm doing a program that they're putting on called Girl Thrive, which is just, basically it's a smaller version of Girl Live, which is a seminar that we used to do in person. But my portion of this seminar is talking about the body. So we're doing mind, body, spirit. I'm talking about the body and how we can just thrive in our own bodies. But my focus is, for people who specifically are working from home, which is almost everyone right now, and how we can kind of save our bodies from the effects of that. And so I'm kind of putting together, at-home workouts that we can do that are just very, very simple, that don't require a lot of gym equipment, body weight stuff, body weight stretches and body weight movements that you can do from your desk, things like that. Because even though, the market's kind of saturated with that stuff right now, I think, people still need that, especially women, because if we're, even myself, I'm sitting here and I'm talking about this and I'm still sitting like an idiot. I'm still sitting with my shoulders hunched forward and like my neck craned over like a vulture, so I feel like people need to be drilled, that information needs to be drilled into their heads of, keep your body as good as you can have it so that you can perform the tasks you need to do. You can't, like people say, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I certainly understand that because the last month has been super stressful. So I'm kind of trying to take, what I have learned in my experience, because I don't have the kinesiology degree. I certainly wish I did. But I do have the experience. So I'm trying to make people know, don't do what I did and don't be, a total mental head case. Take care of your body because it'll help your mind too.
It's a good point about the stress. I mean, if you don't have some kind of outlet, something heavy to push against, the stress will eat you alive, especially during COVID, because there's so many, I working evenings and weekends, recording lectures and doing all this online stuff and trying to control academic honesty and all this stuff. Like, thank God for the barbells. I don't know how people who don't do that, do they just get ulcers? I don't know.
Yeah, the thing that I look at, like, we got my 5-year-old loaded, and like, when you look at it at the grand scheme of things, we're the same thing. He's just 5 and I'm almost 45, but like he literally needs time to just run. And so every afternoon it's like, you're going to the gym and you're just gonna I'm taking the leash off and you just don't stop for 3 hours. And adults are the same, but we just learn to, okay, well, I won't, because that's not what I do. It's not that we don't need it. We just quit doing it, and we're not in a day of age now where it's like, okay, I need to cut wood to keep my house warm. We have, you can live life with no physical outlets now easily, so
without even leaving your home.
You just don't have to go anywhere. Like Amazon, and they'll deliver your food. They'll bring everything. Your toilet paper will just show up at your door. You can literally just sit on the couch. So
and it's interesting. You had mentioned the teaching online. So I've taught online I've been teaching for 12 years. I guess I'm going into my 13th year, and I've taught online for 10. So this has been kind of an interesting moment, with COVID, in that before. Teaching online was kind of, it's pretty ubiquitous now, but there was still that stigma of like, oh, you teach online, like it's not as effective, it's not as legitimate, even though I'm, teaching for university, right?
Yeah.
So, it's been kind of an interesting shift in seeing like, okay, now my skills are really needed because everything is online. My whole university has switched to online. My whole community college has switched to online. And so it's been this really interesting shift where I have been able to kind of figure out and manage how I need to take care of my body while also teaching online, because I know, because I've been doing it for a decade, like I said, that I can't sit for 6 hours and then go train.
Yeah.
So I've been able to kind of manage it. Whereas now people who have been teaching for 20 years are coming to me and saying, I'm exhausted. How do you do this? You know, and I'm trying to tell them, you have to move, you have to get up, you have to move around. You know, you have to do something outside of just sitting at the Zoom screen and staring at their face, which we were not meant to do, right? We're not meant to like just stare at someone's eyes forever and ever. It's kind of creepy after a while. But, you know, I feel like it's been a really interesting shift, and, you know, both professionally, I guess, or athletically, I should say, rather, in, you know, trying to get people or convince people that moving is important, and you can't just prioritize your job. You have to prioritize your health because that's your life. And then also, you know, feeling like, okay, like what I'm doing is not as stigmatized as it used to be. This is pretty cool to be, to have my skills be, you know, needed in this way. So it's been pretty interesting.
Let's talk about potentially what's coming up then. With everything that's going on, how's the Highland Games season looking, or is it?
Oh, man.
I know it's hard to forecast that, but
yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't know. I've heard rumblings about the Phoenix Games here. They're still kind of, you know, people are gun shy, and I get it. You know, it's tough because you don't want to put people at risk. And, you know, if you have a festival, you know, like the Phoenix Games, that's going to have, you know, 10,000 people over the course of the weekend, you know, and we still have, you know, gathering restrictions, then obviously that's not feasible. But, you know, I'm hoping that some of the early season games will be pushed back to like late spring instead of early spring. You know, we're very lucky here in the Southwest in that we have great weather. So we do have a lot of early season games. And I've been very fortunate in that I lived in California, now I live in Arizona. So I've been in two states where we have great weather as far as, you know, competition and training. So I've gotten kind of spoiled. Whereas, you know, you guys are in, you know, a place where it does snow in Kansas.
Yep.
Yeah. So I feel like we're especially kind of being brats in the sense that we've had those early season games taken away from us, where a lot of people don't get those anyway because it's too cold to compete. But, you know, I think eventually we will recover, but I do think the unfortunate side effect is that it's going to affect the bottom line of a lot of the festivals. And when you affect your bottom line, then you affect how much money is paid out to the pros. You know, so I do fear for the pro classes, you know, but I do think that the cool thing about that said, I do think the cool thing about the community is that the community is really pretty good at coming together when they feel like their community is in danger. So, you know, and that's, like I said, that's just super unique to Highland Games, but I would say also just strength sports. Like we try to take care of each other. And, you know, I know that if a games was in danger, that the community itself and even the athletes themselves would try to figure out a way to make it happen, you know, safely. And I think the best kind of example of that is that, you know, I had my friend Felicia, who I think she was one of the ones that you had invited to the competition.
Yep.
Well, last year, 2 years ago rather, 2019, sorry. You know, we had kind of talked with the organization that runs the games in San Diego, and they used to have a pro class that for the men, they stopped having it. You know, we had kind of said, hey, why don't we have a women's elite class? We weren't even calling it pro. We were just calling it women's elite. We want to have a women's elite class, and there was just no money. You know, they said there was no money. So there was kind of this idea of, you know, there's no money for it. We can't do it. It's too soon. The game's in June, and, you know, this was probably February. And Felicia was told, you know, by the powers that be, there's just not enough time, you know. And of course, you know, when you tell us, you know, strength athlete can't do something.
Yeah.
Well, me, you know. So she did a really awesome job in, you know, collecting from the community money for the women's elite class, and you know, raised I think like $3,000 or maybe more than that, and got donations from the community, and just said, hey, we want to do this. We're doing the same thing that the pro men do. You know, donate and, you know, see what the ladies can do. And we were able to get just a ton of money for us, and everybody got paid out every single place. You know, everybody went home with something, and I don't remember what the top prize was, but we got some really, really strong girls out, and put on a show for the crowd. And I think that was one of my despite being, I think, injured at the time, I think that was one of the best games that I did. I think just because I was so fucking pumped that all of these people supported us, you know? So it just kind of goes to the point that, you know, when we're in trouble and when we feel like our sport is in danger, or our, you know, ability to do the thing that we love is in danger, then we'll figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I haven't even heard about the Arnold or anything. What's going on with it? I know there's a date set, but I don't know if it's even going to happen.
Yeah.
That was a big.
I heard May. I think they're moving it. Pretty.
They're moving it to May now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that'll help me because I don't have to travel 2 weekends in a row then. But I got to go down to Texas the weekend after the March date. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's gonna be weird. But you guys got anything else to add?
No, that's good stuff. It's Heather, you're a perfect guest. I mean, the Egghead Meathead thing is it's sort of our mission, and you exemplify that.
Yeah.
So love it.
I feel like I've talked a lot, but I don't know. I feel like I'm in a really unique spot to be able to convey, you know, like you guys were saying, how important it is, you know, for mind and body, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about the idea of the student athlete, and you know, you can't be an athlete forever. You know, you can kind of, I feel like a lot of people transition from athletics into coaching, right? Which I assume is probably what I will do too. But you know, you can't be an athlete forever, but you can sure as hell be a student forever. You can be a student of your sport forever. So, you know, I feel like it's at some point, and I know I'm going to go through this, and I'm already sort of experiencing it now. Your body is finite, right? Your body is not going to be able to do the things. Not everybody is Phil. You can't deadlift 7. But you know, I'm not going to be able to press an axle or deadlift or do whatever for the rest of my life. But I can develop my mind. But I have to be able to strike that balance in order to be able to do that, you know, and be able to keep everything going for as long as possible. For me, it's about longevity. You know, I might not ever go to a world competition again. I might not, you know, get the PR that I'm shooting for. But if I can keep doing something for as long as possible, then I'm cool. I'm cool with that.
Well, and yeah, I mean, that's what I tell people all the time. It's not so much about the PR or the win.
Mm-hmm.
It's just striving for it. That's really where you have to find your happiness. You know, you're still going for something. You're still learning more every day. You're trying to push your body more every day, whatever it is. And it's less about the win. And like this competition I have coming up, it's just about still doing it. You know, that's where I'm at. It's like, I'm still out there. You know, I've been doing this so damn long. And I'm just happy to go out there and like I walk away and it's like, I'm still got all my limbs. I'm good. You know? So it's a win. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us, Heather.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We'll do it again. So good luck on the upcoming season, whatever that is. And
thank you.
Everybody have a good weekend.
Awesome.
Yeah.
See you.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on IronRadio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.